Hey guys, let's start.
In times like these, being a citizen is a big job. Thank you for joining us to celebrate the virtues of self-rule and debate the state of our republic. Welcome to the Citizens Prerogative Podcast. This is the voice of your nerdy host, Michael Piscatelli, and we are blessed with a co-host whose passion for our republic precedes him everywhere he goes, Raymond Wong Jr.
Thank you. It was judicious to be here today.
This is episode number 35. We're still in season 2, and we've just finished the Back to Basics series of episodes, and now we're moving into just a usual set of episodes for the time being. Today, specifically, we're going to be talking more about patriotism. It's timely because we're starting to see some of the sentencing and some of the responses of the judiciary to some of the individuals who stormed the Capitol earlier this year around January 6th, or on the day of January 6th, the date that should live in infamy for now on.
It is an interesting experiment in democracy that we're watching. We're seeing the three branches of government, which rightfully so have their checks and balances. And we're seeing that the judicial branch is taking the adult's position in the room, thankfully. It's very interesting for me to see how patriotism is playing out, because Congress seems confused about patriotism. And although the president, the administrative branch is trying to realign things, it itself is having a hard time aligning the people.
Yeah, the executive and legislative branches are a little bit hamstrung, pardon the phrase, but I mean they're tied up by politics, right? More than anything. And we've covered this, and we'll probably start going back to some of the earlier episodes, like in season 1 and whatnot, just to kind of bring back some of those themes. But we had talked about that, in prior episodes, the gravity that political parties create and how it warps our system, how it was not necessarily originally envisioned to sustain parties, because parties are self-interested, right? And not necessarily align their self-interest with the greater good that the government should be concerned with. And so you see these parties really, really, come to power, so to speak, in how they control government after elections. And the judiciary so far, I mean, up until recent decades, perhaps, maybe some people can argue it's always been a little bit political, but it's supposed to not be political, right? The judiciary is supposed to be all about the law and interpreting the law, regardless of your politics. You should be using logic and precedents and the written word of the law passed by various legislatures.
It's scary to me to think that we have this three-legged table and we're really leaning on one. And what is reassuring, though, is that we've seen disbarment, right? We've seen action from the judiciary that is actually giving us clear guidance, which is the whole idea, the idea of the ruling, the decision. I just hope that people continue to follow the rulings, right? How long can the system bear the political elites stoking their base and then blaming the courts? We saw it a little during the Bush administration, right? Activist courts was a big topic during that time.
Yeah, it's been interesting to see how the courts have gotten involved in elections. Especially because historically they haven't really gotten involved in elections. Usually the elected bodies resolve elections. So let's make that a pivot point to just revisit a little bit of, what happened on January 6th, what could have happened, not necessarily just storming the Capitol, but the idea of counting the electors' votes in those mahogany boxes that were, in Congress and the Senate, and what votes get placed in those mahogany boxes, right? Because these were the votes of the slates of electors from the Electoral College. in many cases. And so those slates of electors are chosen by each state based on each state's rules or laws. Back in the day, if we go all the way back, presidents were selected by a vote in the Senate, if I recall correctly. And then if the Senate couldn't come to a clear conclusion on who was going to be the president, then it went to the House, which involved more votes. So that's the old school way of doing things before we were all fully enfranchised with our vote. Our representatives were the ones selecting the president. And if you go back, to that around that era, state houses were, eventually also involved in selecting who a state was voting for president, right? And so on January 6th, one of the arguments that was being made, especially like Georgia, I don't know if many of the other states were having to face down some of these arguments. They were saying, well, we don't have confidence in the voting that was executed at the county level. We want the state house to replace the popular vote, excuse me, the popular vote, where individuals cast their ballots at the county, throw that out and just take a vote in their legislature, right? So the legislature in a lot of these cases was controlled by Republicans. So they had a vested interest to throw out the electors that were selected by the people and replace them with their own. And historically speaking, they have the power and the authority to do that. Now, they didn't, because that power play came too late and they didn't line up their secretaries of states. And, too many people were beholden to their constitutions rather than these crazy people that are telling them not to listen to their constitutions at the state level. It's pretty severe. I don't know if I haven't seen any of the documentaries yet on it and whatnot, but we came very close to slipping back into a time of the past in America, and when, the elites really executed elections or conducted elections on our behalf. And that didn't happen, thankfully, right? They preserved the boxes. People stormed the Capitol to try and interrupt that process, but they preserved the boxes, and those boxes contain the results of the people's vote.
And let's be clear again, the staff, right? The unpaid staff and of the Capitol preserved the boxes. All right. The senators and all of them cowered and barricaded the doors and then claimed later that it was tourists. So it's really a challenging situation to see that there was an active effort. And I think this is what we're going to show in the end. The investigation may show that there was an active concerted effort to actually overturn the election, to destroy the ballots, just to create the confusion, just to force the states to have to go back and revisit this. And that level of chaos would have been detrimental to the entire system. It would have shaken the very core of what our Constitution is. And I just want to go back to that, Michael. We need to remind our listeners that fact that the government, like the amount of voting power we have now, is subjective. The states have a lot of power to overturn our will. And that goes back to what we've said in the past, that the government doesn't trust us to make our own decisions, right? They have to have this pressure valve, which is extremely dangerous, which shows its danger with the January 6th insurrection. This pressure valve is extremely dangerous, and it's only there for the elites. It's not there for us. It's in case the elites are like, oh, they made the wrong decision this time, right?
Yeah. Yeah, they see it as, the patriarchy always sees itself as taking care of the system that they put in place. And so, at any point in time, they can recall or, re-entrench that power, remove the power of the choice from us and further republican-size, meaning, more enfranchise our representatives than the citizens, right? So it's a struggle between a dichotomy between republic, representative democracy through, our republic, versus small d democracy, making each individual's voice count. And that dichotomy, that that little bit of stress there has always been present, ever present in our system. And we have to be careful not to slide back away from having greater democracy, which is what we have today when your vote counts. But make no mistake about it, more important than democracy is the republic functioning, is the republic working. So these valves are there to uphold maybe or sustain in a moment of crisis the legitimacy of our system, that it can come to a conclusion, right? We can botch an election and still have a decision and move forward. It may not be the popular choice, but the republic continues to live another day and then perhaps make itself a more perfect union in the future. But it doesn't always concern itself with that in the moment, right? It's more interested in survival. And
So when you think about, oh, go
Mhm.
ahead.
No, I was going to say, rather than let the system appear a failure, there's these moments of patriarchy that get inserted to say, okay, well, that didn't work. It's okay. We can work around it. We have mechanisms in place. It's a mature republic model.
I appreciate those mechanisms, and I know they're purposeful. I know they serve a purpose. But when it comes to, so then when we look at patriotism as a topic, where did they violate it? Because we all support the right to protest. We at least myself, I can speak to. I'm very pro Black Lives Matter protests. I know there was private property damage and such, but what happened that these protesters, they become not just protesters, they become insurrectionists? Like, what's the difference between protests we saw throughout last summer and what happened at the Capitol? Why can't they be called patriots?
Great question. When protest goes wrong, or when the line becomes crossed, and it's not just property damage, right? So let's pivot to some quotes here. Ray and I were talking a little bit about the news because there has recently been, some sentencing that's happened, and there's a judge recently made some headlines here in the sentencing of a man from Michigan. So he was one of the individuals who stormed the Capitol on January 6th. And from his point of view and the argument he makes on behalf of his compatriots or comrades who stormed the Capitol is that they are true patriots trying to save the republic from some kind of false voting records, for which there is no evidence, right? But they are painting themselves as these patriots and subsequently being arrested and put in jail. You're now going to argue you're a political prisoner somehow. And so in any case, this first decision that came out kind of puts all that to bed because it puts it in crystal clear perspective, and it ties perfectly into the definition of a patriot. So I'm going to skip to one thing in here that just gets right to the point. So this is quoting the judge in the case when she was delivering the sentencing of this individual who was found guilty. You called yourself and everyone else patriots, but that's not patriotism. This is Judge Amy Berman Jackson. She says patriotism is loyalty to country, loyalty to the Constitution, not loyalty to a head of state. That is the tyranny we rejected on July 4th. And the head of state she's referring to is the King of England. So we didn't believe in a king then, and we don't believe in a king now.
Wow. That's a ruling which is, I think, powerful, and it's gonna ring throughout history, I hope. And there is an ideal that we don't believe in the king, and we just need to remind folks, if you haven't listened to past broadcasts, there was no executive branch in the first version of our government. They reluctantly added the executive wing. They never wanted the executive branch, but it became necessary, right? It became necessary for the sake of strategy and direction and policy. But geez, like, they never wanted it.
Yeah, very, what is it? Once bitten, twice shy. It's like, oh, we're going to stand up a whole new system. Let's not just have it topple under the weight of another king.
Right. And it was set up in a way that, the person that you ran against was your vice president. You didn't get to hand pick your vice president. So in a ways, it was a system designed very well for collaboration, which we've abandoned in a sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Politics have come to bear to bring us a unified ticket and things of that nature. So, yeah, we had some stumbling blocks early on, and we're here now, and we're still stumbling. So,
But if I think about what you just said about what is patriotism, right? It's a loyalty, and I do think about that the individuals like those state level officials who stuck to their constitution, stuck to the truth, because really it's like we've talked about integrity in business all the time. There's that discussion of integrity. It really is just a decision to, oh, I guess I won't steal any customer information. Like it's just a decision, right?
yeah, and it does require you to critically examine information you're receiving from one place by testing it against another. Like read the Constitution or look up your local state constitution if you feel like you are taking an action in defense of that constitution, you should probably read it first to make sure that that's what your actions are doing. But, this is all a passion play. I have a couple more quotes in here. This is from another, I think this is from another case. But basically the statement was made by another judge in another case that the courts are really seeing the insurrectionists as terrorizing members of Congress. Essentially, the quote here is, and then in addition to that, patriots are not the ones who attack the operations of Congress. That's revolution, not patriotism. So basically, we all are citizens of the system. We all are beholden to the rules. And the only way the system works is when we all essentially follow the rules together. And that one set of rules is clearly outlined in the Constitution and any subsequent decisions, challenges to it. So, but it's that loyalty, right? It comes back to loyalty.
Yeah.
And
the
political parties have done a very good job of warping people's sense of where their loyalties should lie. Especially, if I want to pick one or the other, when you look at loyalty as a function of a party, it's very Republican, capital R, way of thinking, right? Being loyal to the party, being loyal to the heads of that party. Like Liz Cheney just got taken out, right? Taken out's the wrong phrase, but she just lost her seat as third most powerful, I think, Republican in Congress, right? Recently, that was within the last 6 months. Because her loyalty wasn't to the party. Her loyalty wasn't to this former head of state. Her loyalty was to the Constitution, to the system.
Which is not what they want right now in the current system, right? They want you to be beholden to whatever's going to make the most profit and continue to line the pockets of the politicians. I don't know exactly what they're motivated by, but what I'm moved by this idea that so to me, patriotism is almost like I'm just thinking about in my head, like getting on the freeway. We all agree and get on these roadways, and we all use the roadways on the freeways. For the most part, you have variants once in a while, but we are capable. The citizens are capable of showing patriotism in the sense of following the law and doing things where we all interact with each other, but also create the greatest harm. I can't think anything other than a freeway traveling at 80 miles per hour, but yet we all can pull it off.
Intersections are an interesting microcosm in following the rules.
Right. And it's an American experiment too, uniquely, because you don't see it's not very effective in other countries.
Mm-mm.
You notice that? Like our rule of law is a little bit heavier. There's something going on with left turn lanes in Arizona. I don't know about you, but the red light doesn't mean anything to anyone for left turn arrows, but there's still an overall adherence, a large adherence to law. I feel, and traffic law is one of them, right? Because it's the most likely place you're going to face the judicial system, which is very efficient in passing the judgment and then getting financial compensation.
Mm-hmm. And that's if you survive, right? So hopefully the first inkling is self-preservation. And then once you survive the accident, you hope the law doesn't come down on you too hard.
I like that. Yeah, self-preservation, you're right. It probably plays I'm always just thinking about the law. That's the only reason I don't run people off the road.
With that, I think we'll have a word from our sponsor, Citizen Do Good. Fulfilling a dream while all possess an intrinsic love for self-rule that is reciprocated with free speech and equal justice under the law, Citizen Do Good values the promise of all of the amendments to the Constitution, along with the original core documents. Taken together, they form a framework and an operating manual for the Republic, and it provides us with the means to change with the times. The time is now to deeply re-examine our current implementation of governance for the dawning of a new day. We are a proud sponsor of the Citizens Prerogative podcast, a major partner in spreading the good work about civic love and the power of change for us all. At Citizen Do Good, we want to empower all citizens to participate in their republic in a reconstructive way. With that goal in mind, we need your help to stay on mission and grow this community. Please rate the podcast with 5 stars on iTunes, through the app on the web, or on your device. If you don't feel you can give us 5 stars, let us know why on our sponsor's Facebook page, Citizen Do Good. Also, make sure you check out our newsletter at citizendogood.com. You'll get updates every couple of months on all of our antics, not just the podcast. While you're there, check out the shop, which has specialty merch and provides a way to make a one-time contribution that helps us pay for production and for hosting. Feel free to share any suggestions you have directly through the Contact Us page. Thanks for your support.
I think that when we started talking about this episode, how we're going to approach it, I had a much different idea about what patriotism is, especially in my youth. I thought that was just cheering. I thought that was just having a flag up, right? I thought that was, I didn't get it that everyday personal responsibility could be patriotism. And I think it's important we talk about this, Mike. I appreciate you putting this one forward because patriotism is being hijacked. Patriotism is at risk of becoming a bad word.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And it's a good one to leave us with, right? To talk a little bit about the call to action for each of us. So maybe become a little bit more familiar with the rules are. Now that we've got people storming capitals and things of that nature, it behooves all of us to take a moment and refamiliarize ourselves with some of the founding documents, not just the federal government's founding documents, but your state, your local government. Take a minute and go check out your county's website. Your county has a website. You're paying taxes for all of their salaries. Check out what kind of services and things they have going on there. But the more you know about the Republic and the more you know about how your local government operates, the more in power you'll be. And that's truly a patriotic thing to do, right? Like if we take a step back and we really appreciate the Republic as a gift from our ancestors, however flawed they may have been, the idea of this country, and this is something many presidents have brought up, many politicians or representatives throughout the years have brought up, the fact that this country is difficult, and it's difficult for a good reason because it's born of an idea, not of a blood or of a culture. And it's the idea that we're all born with inalienable rights and we should be free to pursue happiness. And this whole thing's been set up to help facilitate that at the end. And loyalty to that, loyalty to this pretty amazing system. It's unique on the earth and it's entrusted to us to, keep improving it, making it a more perfect union. How could you be, what could be less, more patriotic than that? Caring about that. And speaking up for it. you know, it's okay for us to be critical. It's important for us to be critical. I mean, that's, you know, tough love is probably the truest love. And I don't mean that, you know, from a physically abusive perspective, but when you critically examine things like these systems that we're all beholden to and that are supposed to help us all along, you know, we can make them better. We can't make them better if we don't look at things critically. So, you know, that's the kind of love we have to bring to the table. And it's not looking at it critically, just why it, not just why it doesn't work for me. You know, it's for all of us too. But you know what? If it's the selfish motivation, you know, that gets you to that point where you're investing your time and your energy into becoming more of a patriot, then that's fine with me. Kind of whatever gets you there, right?
It's interesting as I think about what we can do as a call to action. I feel more and more that you just have to engage in the conversation. For me, patriot, and I find myself being more and more concerned with patriots, if you will. But now I am pulling back and saying, wait a minute, I just need to be part of the conversation and say, oh, that's not patriotism. They weren't patriots. You know, don't let them fool you. It's really patriotism is following the law, following the Constitution, following the common bond. And I think we all can understand what was wrong with January 6th is what's wrong with if anybody did that to your house. I mean, that is the people's house, which means it is your house as well. And we all know there are rules when it comes to barging into someone's front door or even breaking their window, which is even worse. That general bond, that I think patriotic ideal that we respect the property, that we respect each other's space, if you will, it was violated then. And I don't understand how any American, good American, can look at what happened that day and not understand why it crossed the line and why it was an absolute violation.
Yeah, I can't get my mind unstuck from the sports metaphors. I mean, when we talk about peaceful transition of power, and that's like one of the biggest ceremonies that makes our republic peaceful, is that whole transition of power is that the loser concedes. Everything about that to me smacks of sports. You know, we're such a sports culture and we have such a sports mentality, then think of it from that perspective, right? What ball game do you want to watch or play in where the rules can be changed mid-game? Right? And you can contest who won or lost the game at the end in perpetuity. Like how in any way is any of that definitive and helpful to move forward? Just like in sports, you know, we have to be good losers. In politics, we also have to be good sports and good losers in that perspective, right? We have to concede power when it makes sense based on the rules we've all agreed to ahead of time.
It's amazing to me that you keep drawing these intersectionalities and things I didn't even like, which is sports. But now I feel armed and ready to have a bold conversation about trying to bring certain people along to understand why Constitution matters and why the process matters that was interrupted on the 6th.
Yeah, guess what? There's going to be another election. The rules say we do it every 4 years. So, you know, come back, play the game better next time, right? And maybe your ideas will win, maybe they won't. But we'll have 4 years to figure that out. No one election is the end of anything in our system. It can't be. We can't survive that way.
No, it can't be. Someone receiving a positive test, a drug test, cannot be a media swell that changes policies for the Olympic organization, right? So I feel like the Olympics themselves, the rules are the rules. We all follow the rules, and if they're wrong, we change them. That's patriotism. And I didn't think about that until the end of this episode today. It's been interesting to actually have my own evolution on patriotism and realize that the more we do things the same and the more we follow the rules, is actually being patriotic.
Especially when there's any amount of sacrifice involved in it, right? On our own, for ourselves. So I think that's a good place to leave things. We'll see if we get feedback on this one. Maybe there's some other ideas out there on how you all are feeling about patriotism. But I think Ray, you mentioned maybe we have a mission now to reclaim that title and make sure we, reposition exactly what patriotism is so that it doesn't get confused.
I agree with you. And I appreciate you supporting that, because I didn't think about it so much until today that it is a challenge. It's a benefit to have patriotism. What happened in our past and our history was great, but it's part of our history. You don't relive that. You don't try to reignite and have it happen again. Experiencing history is one thing. I think trying to revive it and have a grand reliving of it is dangerous. So learn from history, folks. Don't use history as your planning mechanism.
Yeah. You don't have to make it repeat itself. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen. You just need to be aware of it. Yeah, it doesn't need your help.
It doesn't need help.
I think that's going to close us out. So we have been your hosts. Thank you to Mr. Raymond Wong Jr.
And thank you, Mr. Piscatelli. It truly has been patriotic, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's been something, that's for sure. For information on this and other episodes, head over to citizendogood.com and click on podcast. While you're there, hit up the Contact Us page and leave a comment. We'd love to hear from the community. Special thanks to you, our listeners. We saved the best for last. You are the best, and you have been for years. Thanks for your support. We know it's painful, and we love you. Intro music sampled from OK Class by Ozzy Jocks under Creative Commons license through freemusicarchive.org. Other music provided royalty-free through Fislian Studios, Inc.